So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the organizer for Neuro Challenge for inviting me. This is my first time, and thanks for sticking out till the very end. So I always have the bad luck of speaking either right after lunch when people are a little sleepy, or speaking after Michael Oken. Have you ever been to a concert where Celine Dion or Michael Bublé sang, and then the next one is this high school kid singing after? That's how I feel. Anyway, but this is, I'm going to make it as light, and hopefully we all learn something together from this. And hopefully you have fun and get something. So this is, I took the liberty of expanding the talk a bit to exercise and other non-pharmacological therapies in Parkinson's disease. So this is the Cleveland Clinic. We're very proud to be rated the top 2 hospital in the nation by U.S. News and World Report, and the number 2 hospital in the world by Time magazine. So we're very proud. This is a picture of our hospital in the 1 week each year that there is sun. So we all go out. The next one, these are my disclosures. I am a clinical trialist, so I test different drugs and devices to improve Parkinson's disease, so I am incredibly conflicted. But it's all there. So let me start with kind of the perfect world in Parkinson's disease. As you know, if we're going to address all the symptoms of Parkinson's disease, we have to take a look at it from all different angles, right? So pharmacological or oral therapy or medications, that's just one part of it. But there is the non-pharmacological therapy, the speech therapy, occupational therapy, exercise, and things like that. There's this education part. And then for those patients who need it for advanced therapies in Parkinson's, such as DBS or other surgical procedures. But that's a lot, right? And in reality, as much as we are aware of this and we want to give this to our patients, most of the doctors, myself included, really spend 80% of our time on the medications. It's drugs, drugs, drugs. And then if we're lucky, maybe we'll get a sentence or 2 on non-pharmacological therapies. And maybe we'll give a pointer or a tip or 2 to further their education. The other challenge in Parkinson's disease, as you know, is that it literally and figuratively affects nearly every organ system in the body. So you have the classic motor symptoms of Parkinson's, such as the stiffness, the slowness, the tremor, which we use to this date to diagnose Parkinson's disease. But we all know that it affects other organ systems, other aspects, the GI system, the urinary system, our gait and our balance, and also how we think and how we feel, and then all the rest, fatigue, sleep problems, restless legs, difficulty in smelling things, acting out dreams, weight gain, weight loss. And some of them are intrinsic, meaning that's part and parcel of Parkinson's disease. And a lot of them are iatrogenic, meaning it's brought on by the medications, the very treatments we use for Parkinson's disease. These are side effects of medication. And then to make it even worse, not that there are all these organ systems involved, each patient has a different involvement of these organ systems. Each Parkinson patient is unique. We are unique human beings, and Parkinson's disease carrying it, we're even more unique to the nth degree. So I wrote here Amy, Brad, and Charlie, just 3 individuals, and you'll see that one person has a bit more tremor or classic motor symptom involvement, another person more on the cognition and how we feel on the behavioral symptoms, and another person more involved with gastrointestinal symptoms. So these are kind of the challenges. And in 30 minutes, last talk, after Michael Oken, what can I tell you guys? So I'm going to make it fun, I said. So I did this simple experiment. Just 1 week in my clinic, all the Parkinson patients I saw, I just polled them. I asked the question, what would you say is the single most useful, helpful, non-pharmacological tip or advice or treatment that you have received either from me or from anyone else along your Parkinson journey thus far that I can share with hundreds of people in Bradenton, Florida? So they gave me their responses. I wrote them all down, and I tallied the results. Of course, there are lots of repetitions. So you've heard of word cloud. So word cloud is you put in all the responses, and the more that phrase repeats, the bigger it gets. And then if it's only mentioned once or twice, it's going to be a small word. And so here's the result. This is what my patients that I saw in a whole week, 100 of them, said. That these are the most important things that they've learned thus far in their Parkinson journey. So, a lot of people said walking with sticks, stationary bike, exercise, keep moving, etc., etc. So let's take a closer look, okay? So if you look at this, you'll see many people said walking sideways, walking with a stick, boxing, a stationary bike, exercise, keep moving, Tai Chi, walking, cane with laser, running, platform, using a platform walker. So what's common with all these things in orange? Just all moving. So what's common is lesson number 1 that I'm going to impart that I learned, mobility is king. So although a lot of people had tips on, gave me statements that what made them stronger now is tips on getting involved, being more educated, improving their apathy, improving their motor fluctuations, improving their posture, talking better, anti-constipation tips. But the king, the overwhelming majority, it's not even 50%, it's 70% of responses had something to do with keep moving. So I thought that was quite interesting. But it's actually founded in literature. So this is one just on healthy patients. They don't have Parkinson's disease, the effect of physical fitness. It's a study done by Newman, and it was published at JAMA, a very reputable journal. It involved elderly adults, elderly patients with or without Parkinson's disease. And the task was just to walk a quarter of a mile as best they can. And then what they did was divide the group into quartiles. So from the slowest walkers to the fastest walkers. So that's the mobility. So the Q1, the green one, is the fastest walkers. And then the slowest ones are the Q4. And just by the speed of their walking, you could see the fastest walkers lived longer, and they were less likely to develop heart disease and heart attacks as compared to the slower walkers. So just mobility in itself is such a natural thing. And that's likely why, without even knowing it, our patients, when I ask them, what's the best thing that you've ever received that's not a drug? Well, the advice to keep moving, or whatever makes them moving. So this is a nice founded kind of lesson. Now, what prevents us from moving is balance, right? If you're going to fall, then it's going to be hard to move. So there are these exercises that actually have been shown to improve balance. Yoga, we have a poster over there, a banner. Tai Chi is the one that has the most proof amongst the exercises, but even dancing can do that. So there's this one study by Lee that compared Tai Chi versus resistance training, which is weights, and stretching, just stretching exercises. This is 1 hour twice a week for 6 months. So this is a legitimate kind of prolonged exercise study. One group had Tai Chi, one group had weights, and another group just stretched. 1 hour twice a week. And they were followed, and Tai Chi won against resistance in improving directional control, in improving stride length, gait velocity. Not gait velocity, but leg. And then also the number of falls were much less from the people who did Tai Chi compared to just weights. And then comparing Tai Chi and stretching, Tai Chi won in nearly every outcome measure, including decreasing the number of falls. And the kicker is that even after the study was done, 3 months after they stopped the Tai Chi, people who got the Tai Chi from the beginning still were falling much less than those who got the weights and the stretching. So if you could do it, if you haven't tried it yet, I think this is one great tip. Okay. So I just wanted to share with you this, I think Dr. Oken said he came back from China, and I was there with him once, and I was with our other group another time, and this is in West Lake in Hangzhou. It's beautiful what they have there. And I'm really a night owl, and so it is very difficult for me to wake up at 6 a.m. But every day that I was there, I woke up at 6 a.m. to jog around the lake. And the reason was there were hordes of people around the lake. They gathered themselves into groups. And this is two samples that I had. So one group where they were doing martial arts, another group was doing ballroom dancing, that's the one shown in the picture, another group Tai Chi, another group karate, or whatever it is. Another group pop music, all around the circle, around that West Lake, which was as big as Central Park. All of them, 6 o'clock at night, in the morning, they were exercising, and they were keeping themselves moving. So I thought I'd share this with you to just kind of get the message straight. So the second lesson I got is that freezing is kind of important. So a tip that they learned to prevent freezing was very helpful to our patients. So the ones that they got, walking sideways, walking with a stick, using a cane with a walker, or even running to kind of overcome freezing was the sample. So this is a patient, I'm sure you could relate to him. If you could cross your hands across your chest and then try to stand patient, up. Not everyone freezes, but when they freeze, this is as typical as you can get. Now I'd like you to start walking out the door. So I asked him to walk, and you could see the initiation of the walk. Gait ignition failure, we call it. Okay, just try your best. And then sometimes you get a rhythm, and sometimes not, and you have to hold on to the wall. And then getting into thresholds, like doors, that's going to be tough. So you have to say something, or you have to hold it again. So I think you get the message. It's quite debilitating. It's really in the way of enjoying everything we wanted to enjoy. And if we could only get rid of this, or do something about it, it makes our lives infinitely better. Oh, that's another part during the turning. And so, to overcome freezing, some of the patients I saw during that poll said running, cane with laser, and walking sideways. So physical therapy is our best antidote to this, more than drugs. And as you know, for those of you who went to physical therapy, they make cues. They put visual cues, such as stepping over a line to overcome freezing. Or when you're getting upstairs, this is one technique when you go side to side and you step on a circle so that you unfreeze. And then also when you have a cane that has a marker there that you could jump over or step over, then that also helps you unfreeze. And then as become more and more sophisticated, we have now technology that you can put these laser markers in your shoe as a clip, and so that whenever you're freezing, you look at them and you go over that laser marker that you have. So these are just some examples we have for freezing. So the third lesson, so it's kind of very similar, but I'm going specific. So one is mobility in general, and then anti-freezing tips, and then the next is really exercise. You could see here, they're exercising in different ways humanly possible. Some are boxing, some are doing yoga, Tai Chi, and then just others just stationary bike. Stationary bike is very in at the clinic, and so that's why it's a big letter word in there. It may not be universal for all, but I bet you, any Parkinson center, that exercise will remain likely the biggest word in the word cloud. Okay, so we weren't really much into exercise until about a decade and a half ago. This was started by a study in Seattle. It's an HMO study of close to 2,000 elderly individuals, and they looked at patients who exercised vigorously, aerobically, at least 3 times a week. And then they followed them over 6 years. And those patients, the elderly patients who exercised vigorously 3 times a week, were 40% less likely to develop dementia compared to those who did not exercise. And so after that, the media caught on fire, and then nearly every study we have showed that exercise is beneficial. Especially in Parkinson's, we were a little bit slow though. We did it in animal models. So this is an example of a mice model for Parkinson's disease. So how we do this is, if you look at the first arrow there, one is EX, it shows EX, that's exercise. So one group of mice exercised, and then the other group did not. And then after that, on day 0, we injected this chemical, OHDA, to induce Parkinson's to the mice. And then those mice who had exercised before OHDA was injected in their brains, they did much better as if they had no Parkinson's compared to that of those who did not exercise. So the experiments in mice were so robust, it was so life-changing for the mice who had artificially induced Parkinson's disease. In humans, it's good, but it's not as dramatic as that in mice, right? I mean, I think you would attest to that. And so this one was where the aha moment of our biomedical engineer, Dr. J. Alberts at the clinic. This was the moment when he had this. He was organizing this Iowa bike ride for Parkinson's disease, and that's their group. It got larger and larger each year to raise funds and raise awareness for Parkinson's disease. And then as it became more popular, the Parkinson patients also wanted to participate. But this is a really serious bike ride, hundreds of miles in the Midwest. And so to make it easier for the Parkinson patients to participate, they created they used tandem bikes. So you could see here the one in front is the professional, and then the one in the back is the Parkinson patient. And so most of the energy was really on the professional biker, and the patient, all they had to do was sit there and then pedal as fast just to keep up with the pace. And at the end of each leg, the Parkinson patients started telling Dr. Alberts, "My gosh, my Parkinson's is so much better. I couldn't even keep up with you. all I did was just trying to pedal as like with you, but you were doing all the work, and look at this, my shaking is better, I'm moving better, etc., etc. And that's the aha moment for Dr. Alberts when he said, now that explains why the mice were doing better than the human exercise experiments. It's because in the mice, we were forcing them to keep up with the treadmill, because we can't tell the mice, okay, go and exercise. You can't do that, right? So you have to put a treadmill in front of it, drop the mice, and let it do its thing so that it doesn't fall off. Whereas in humans, up to that date, most of the exercises were voluntary exercises. Okay, you do this, you run, you do this. But it wasn't a paced or a forced exercise. So that's when he started the experiment of forced exercise versus voluntary exercise. So this is a simple experiment. So it was 40 minutes of either forced exercise where they were in this tandem bike and all they have to do is keep up with the pace, or you just try your best if you were on the voluntary exercise group. In fact, the voluntary exercise group had bigger effort than the ones with a forced exercise who just had to keep up with the pace. And so what was the result of this? You will see here the orange bar is for the forced exercise group and the blue bar is for the voluntary exercise. So the first graph is the VO2, that's a measure of fitness. You could see that the forced exercise was a little bit better numerically, but it wasn't statistically significant. So which means any form of exercise, whether it's forced or voluntary, will improve your fitness. But then towards, in the other one, it's the UPDRS. You see that? That's a Parkinson motor score. And the higher the score, the worse you are, the slower you are. And so that's the baseline. You could see the baseline of the orange and the blue. They're the same. They're very similar. And then at the EOT, that means here, that's the first arrow here. That's the end of treatment. At the end of the treatment of the 3 months, you could see that the orange bar is much lower. So their Parkinson scores improved significantly compared to those with voluntary exercise. And even better, 2 weeks after the treatment and 4 weeks after the treatment, when they stopped exercising, those who was grouped into the forced exercise still did better. And so at the clinic, it is a prescription. They all have to do forced exercise if they can do it. So this was a nice story that I wanted to share. And then other groups did the same thing, aerobic versus just stretching. And even in executive functioning, you could see that the aerobic people, compared to the just stretching, did better even in their thinking process. So this is one nice example of exercise. So the problem with exercise is, and all these theories and all these experiments on exercise, is the placebo effect, right? Patients want to feel better, they want to do better, and doctors want to make their patients better. Obviously, you cannot, unlike a drug, when you have half of the patient getting the real drug and half the patients getting a sugar pill, but they look exactly the same. For exercise, you kind of know whether you got the forced exercise or you got the couch potato kind of thing, right? It's fairly, and of course, if you got the exercise, you're going to try your best when they measure things, and so it could be a little skewed. Thankfully, we now have this Fmri. This is an MRI, but instead of looking at the structure of the brain, it looks at the function of the brain and the blood flow of the brain. And you could see there is a difference between the blood flow of the brain before exercising and after exercising. You could see that. Of course, no amount of placebo could do this. You can't force your brain to have more flow in one part or another after exercise. So, and you know, the kicker here is that This is the same nearly identical blood flow picture in the MRI of patients before they take their medications and after they take their medications. So it's like exercise was doing the same thing that the medications were doing. So now we have proof beyond human quality control. There are other exercises that have been shown. I'm just going to give you an example. It's not just our group that showed blood flow changes with exercise. It's also in other research groups. So from the cornfields of Iowa, it started this story of this forced exercise, tandem biking, and then it became a clinical trial that was very successful, and now we practice it in our clinics. Okay, almost there. Lesson number 4, patients really like to be engaged. You could see here, what is the most important thing that was ever given to you? Oh, the Fox Trial Finder, volunteering, Parkinson.org, as you know, has a lot of tips. So they want to be engaged in this thing. So the lesson I have here is really for myself, is that when I see a patient in clinic for the first time or the second time, I really try as best I can to lay the foundation, to give them education, because that'll lead to interest in joining support groups. And then when they join support group, that'll lead to interest in finding out how they can help. FoxTrialFinder.com, Parkinson.org, and then hopefully they'll volunteer in a clinical trial or in other areas. Lesson number 5, patients will do anything to avoid motor fluctuations. So as many drugs we have to make each Parkinson medication connect from dose to dose, those that fall short are still really bothered by it. And they would do anything, such as here, low protein diet. They're trying to decrease the competition of the food in their stomach so that they can maximize their Parkinson or their levodopa. Pill alarm. They don't want to forget the pill so that they don't fall short. And even, I suspect, a lot of the Parkinson.org patients, they're looking for tips on how to prevent their motor fluctuations. In fact, if you look at the literature here, there's one study that looked at the 24 most bothersome conditions in the advanced Parkinson patients and in the early Parkinson patient. And in the advanced Parkinson patient, you could see number 1, above all else, at least in this survey, motor fluctuations was very bothersome for them. And even in the early Parkinson patients where you think fluctuation shouldn't be an issue, it was still in the top 15, motor fluctuations. So I thought that was very revealing that Parkinson patients are quite bothered to this day on motor fluctuation. Lesson number 6. It's so preventable, so now I'm going to ask if they poop regularly. I mean, we all have to move our bowels. And so, you know the techniques for this. Don't underestimate this. It makes a big difference. Those commercial with a lady just being so happy after I think that is so spot on. And then, so here, look at this. Another survey, another study looking at the unmet needs in Parkinson patients, the motor and the non-motor. And if you look at the non-motor, number 1 is fatigue. I give that. Number 2, constipation. So it's really important. Water, water, water. Prunes, fiber, exercise, they all come together. The better you poop, the better life is. And then the last, and then I'm done, I promise. We can all go home. Lesson number 7, what struck me, Parkinson's is such an individual illness. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You know, someone said her lifesaver was a massage. The other one said, speak louder. the tip of speaking louder. Another one, getting a dog. And another one, a platform walker. Another one, silk pajamas. So my lesson here is that you just never know what will stick with your patients, what your patients will appreciate. So you have to explore all these things because you just never know when you actually could make a big difference. So I used getting a dog. The condition I was trying to treat here was apathy. You know, when you don't feel like doing anything. So I said, how can I force you to do something? Well, a dog, as you know, is high maintenance, right? You have to groom, you have to walk it, you have to watch them poop so you can also poop. So you have to scoop the poop too. So I thought that this would force them to do something, otherwise the dog would just not thrive, right? But the difference is that the dog gives unconditional love. And so they're both incentivizing each other to keep at it. And I tell you, a couple of my patients, they bring their dog in clinic. They just love their dog. They abandon their children, just the dog. And so at least it worked for them. The silk pajamas are for patients that have difficulty turning in bed. And the smoothness of the silk made it easier for them to turn, and therefore they could sleep. And when they slept better, their morning was better, and they thanked us heavily for it. Who knew that silk pajamas was going to be the answer to their problems? What else? Speaking louder. LSVT, speaking louder. This is for several of the professors that we have that speaking louder was important. A platform walker is a walker where you have an armrest support. So these are for people who had a twisted trunk, and then the armrest in the platform forced them to do this. It's a very good trick. If you haven't tried that, you have to try it. And then a light Swedish massage for pain was the lifesaver for another patient. So that's what I have for you guys. The conclusions are, the most relevant non-pharmacologic therapies that patients most appreciated are those that kept them moving, kept them away from freezing, and kept them walking for as long as possible. Patients want to be engaged. They want to learn. So don't underestimate the power of education. Give them all the tools for them to succeed in their own journey for engagement. The third, exercise is finally gaining traction. I don't have to convince you too much, although I still tried, but it's certainly a much better sell for me now than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And then fourth, indeed, Parkinson's is an individual illness, but if there are some more important than others, it's walking or exercise, impaired balance, inconsistent response to medication, and other non-motor complications. So that's it. Those are the lessons. This is my team. As we say at the Cleveland Clinic, it takes a whole team to provide world-class care. So on behalf of them, I take my bow. Thank you.